Thank you for joining us here today to talk about the very foundation of our democracy, voting. I'm proud to be joined by First Gentleman Marlon Reese, Lieutenant Governor Diane Primavera, Secretary of State Jenna Griswold, Denver City Clerk and Recorder Paul Lopez. We're right outside the Denver Clerk's office. Aurora Mayor Mike Coffin, and State Senator Julie Gonzalez, whose district we are now in. Voting is a sacred right in our Constitution for each and every American. As Thomas Paine eloquently put it, voting is the right upon which all other rights are dependent. And in order to make sure that this sacred right that so many Americans have fought and even died to defend is protected, we need to ensure that voters are safe, have access to ballot boxes, the results will be counted correctly, will be legitimate, and will be respected. You know, Alexis de Tocqueville wrote that long before the appointed election day arrives, the election becomes the greatest and one might say the only affair occupying men's minds. As the election draws near, intrigues grow more active, agitation is more lively and widespread, the citizens divide up into several camps, the whole nation gets into a feverish state. Sounds a lot like today. Well, what de Tocqueville wrote after an election is that everything calmed down quickly like a river that only momentarily overflowed its banks. Is it not astonishing that such a storm could ever have arisen? This is part of our democratic process. People are enthusiastic. They have the right to be enthusiastic about their candidates. They have the right to cast their vote, and we all respect the outcome. You know, holding elections is not enough. Look no further than even countries that, like North Korea and China, that nominally hold elections, but they're nothing but a sham, often with one candidate, with rampant fraud, with irregularities, with intimidation. So holding elections is certainly part of what we need to do to be a democratic republic, but we also need to make sure that those elections are free, fair, and secure. This concept was a radical one over 200 years ago when our nation was founded, and what makes the bold experiment of democracy in America so noteworthy, the movement of democracy sweeping the globe with so many nations now having free and fair elections. And here in Colorado, we take this solemn responsibility seriously. Over the past decade, Colorado has been and is a national model for how to hold safe, secure, reliable, and efficient elections. Every voter in Colorado gets a ballot in the mail. Voters can either mail it in, and we encourage people to mail it in by October 26th to make sure that it is counted, or drop it off all the way through Election Day at an official drop box, over 350 drop boxes across the state that are secure. And for those who prefer to vote in person, there's in-person voting at polling at the voting locations throughout the state up to 3 weeks prior to the election, even if you have not been registered. You can register and vote at the same time if you didn't get a ballot in the mail, if you lost your ballot in the mail. But for most folks, this election is like any other in Colorado. People are mailing in their ballots already. They're using drop boxes. There's an example of a drop box that we're standing beside right here outside the Denver Clerk's office. The counties even have a good protocol for exchanging ballots between counties. So if you live in one county and work in another, no matter which official drop box you use, your vote will be counted. And you know what? When you help people exercise their right to vote by making it convenient, it means that people have a voice, that more people vote. And that is a good thing, because our democratic republic functions better when people participate and have a stake in the outcome. It empowers people. So before I turn it over to the first gentleman, I want to assure Coloradans that we have one of the safest, most secure, most efficient election systems in the entire nation, and I'm proud to say in the entire world. No matter how you vote, your vote matters, it will be counted, and it will make a difference. So make sure you vote today. And with that, I'll turn it over to First Gentleman Marlon Reese, who has really prioritized voting integrity as a key part of the soapbox that he has as First Gentleman. Marlon?
Thank you, Governor. Thank you, everyone. I'm excited to be with you all here today to discuss what I really consider to be the most important of subjects, voting. Voting is, as we've said, the cornerstone of our democracy. A government of the people, by the people, for the people, as Lincoln so beautifully articulated in his Gettysburg Address. When he spoke those words, President Lincoln was honoring the Union soldiers who fought and died to protect our democracy and keep our nation whole. Since that time, generations of Americans have made similar sacrifices to defend this most precious of rights, the right to vote, to speak out, and have our voices heard. The grand experiment, as it's been called, in representative self-government, that shining beacon of hope for those around the world who look to America to set the example. This year in particular, Coloradans across our great state and the political spectrum have proven once again that the right to vote is as vital to the American identity as the soil on which we stand. A record number of Coloradans turned out to vote this year in our state's primary, and for the general election, a record-setting number have signed up to serve as election judges to ensure our elections are safe and secure. That's a good thing, because our democracy is strengthened, the promise is realized when more people participate, when all of us have a hand in shaping our government. Voting is the single most powerful act any of us can make in the name of freedom and justice. It honors the past and those who've sacrificed to defend this right while protecting the future and generations of Americans who will inherit the country we leave behind. It is the singular path to creating real change in our communities, to take up the issues we care about and not merely think about them, not talk about them, but to act on them, to elect representatives who reflect the diversity that is our unique American strength. This election season, I encourage all voters to think about the issues that matter most to you, to your family, to the communities in which you live. Now is the time to think carefully about the country we want to be, the standing we want to have in the world, and the people and issues best suited to make those visions reality. Each vote is a brick laid in the foundation that holds our union together. It is up to each of us to make that foundation as strong and unwavering as possible. This year, as I cast my own ballot, I will be thinking of the people we have lost to the scourge of COVID-19, the injustices that still exist in our nation that we must finally make right, our ailing planet in the throes of a climate crisis of our own making, our oceans, forests, mountains, and skies, the animals whom we share our planet with, who do not get to vote, who depend on us completely in a world that is not always kind or fair. This year, the ballot is long, but remember that everything on it is important. Make sure to give yourself plenty of time to do your research and really get to know the candidates running to represent you. Don't be afraid to ask the tough questions. Then fill out and return your ballot by 7 p.m. on November 3rd. That's Election Day, by the way. If you're mailing in your ballot from home, it must be in your mailbox by October 26th. Otherwise, drop it off in one of the many official ballot drop boxes that our wonderful Secretary of State and county clerks and recorders have ensured are accessible to all Coloradans, like this one here. And don't forget, if you mail your ballot using USPS, this is easy to forget, include a stamp. If you use the official ballot drop box, no stamp is needed. The right to vote is precious, and we must never take it for granted. Thank you, friends. Be well. And it is now my honor to introduce our wonderful Secretary of State, Jenna Griswold.
Well, good morning, everybody. Fall is officially here. A little chilly today, so it's so nice to see everybody. I really want to thank the First Gentleman for all of his engagement. He has really taken the helm when it comes to voting access, and I really appreciate that. So To start off with, it goes, I guess it doesn't go without saying, we have to say it over and over that Colorado leads the nation in voter access. The Colorado election model is very straightforward. You register to vote, then you are mailed a ballot and you can return it to one of hundreds of drop boxes by the mail or a voter service and polling center. And you can also, of course, go vote in person, starting with early voting and all the way up to Election Day. Now, Coloradans tend to choose to vote with a mail ballot. In our June state primary, we set a record turnout, and 99.3% of all ballots cast were with a mail ballot. Mail ballots are used by all voters across party affiliation. The hallmark of our nation is the ideal that everyday people decide the future of our nation. Voting is the great equalizer. As we can see, 2 people voting here. Thank you. You know, it shouldn't matter whether you grew up like me up in the mountains of rural Colorado, whether you're from a big city, the amount of money in your bank account, or the color of your skin. Voting is how Americans make our voices heard, and with such a big election, I encourage all Coloradans to confirm their voter registration, make a plan to vote, and to vote as early as possible. And Coloradans are. Last Friday, county clerks started mailing ballots around the state. They will be mailed by this Friday, and we are already seeing a historical turnout. I know usually we start putting out results in terms of what ballots have come in on next Monday, the beginning of early voting, but we're going to start early this year. We'll be starting to put out those reports today. And I want to report that already 300,795 Coloradans have cast a ballot as of yesterday, and that includes 139,382 Democrats, 57,779 Republicans, and 100,801 unaffiliated voters who have cast the ballot. And to put that into perspective, at this point in 2016, or I should say, at this point right now, we have had 24 times more turnout than at this point in 2016. So we are seeing a lot of enthusiasm, and I think that's good news. Now, next Monday, early voting at voting centers and drop boxes will open in every county across the state. And we've worked very closely with the governor and his office to make sure that election workers at voting centers adhere to state health and safety guidelines so that voting is in person as safe as possible. This year, we have 383 drop boxes available across the state and 342 voting centers, which is an increase of over 50% of drop boxes and an extra 42 voting centers in the last 2 years. We've also rolled out major election innovations. This year, we've added the ability for every voter across the state to track their ballot with ballot tracks. We've also rolled out new technology to cure signature discrepancies, sent PPE to every county for all election workers, recruited over 7,000 election judges, offered $1 million in election judge hero pay, and I will be covering the cost of any county that wants to open voting centers the Sunday before Election Day. Colorado has one of the most accessible elections in the nation. We're also considered the safest state to cast a ballot. An emerging issue to our democracy is the role of disinformation. Election disinformation comes both from foreign adversaries and domestic actors. And my office is launching efforts to combat misinformation. A top strategy is the strategy to ignore the noise. Voters should really consider what they are seeing on social media posts and find election information from trusted sources, like county clerks or the Secretary of State's office. And our one-stop statewide spot for election information is govotecolorado.gov. Colorado is leading the way in accessible, safe, and secure elections during the pandemic, and I am confident we will have a great election. And with that, I want to introduce and also thank Denver's fantastic county clerk, Paul Lopez.
Thank you, Madam Secretary. Thank you, Governor, Mayor, our LG, Senator. Thank you so much for being here. It's voting season. And I really want to stress, well, let me just say this differently. I can't stress enough just how secure, how safe, and how transparent it is to vote in Colorado. 100% pandemic proof. Why can I say that? Because I know that people here can just drop off their ballots in any one of our drop boxes in this county and around the state. People can put a stamp on that ballot and pop it in the mail. And people can also go to a vote center and have a mask and expect all of our election judges and poll workers to have sanitized stations all the way down to the pen. So I want to say a little bit about the people who help these elections, who actually run these elections. Our election judges, our election staff. They work day and night to make sure that this democracy stands solid and continues on. They are working right now just down the street in our elections division, which, by the way, you're able to get online at denvervotes.org/voterinfo and be able to see our live stream inside those processing rooms. These are your friends, these are our family, these are our neighbors working, doing their civic duty for this city, for this county, for this state, and this country, which needs your participation. There are so many issues that require your attention, your participation. The last thing I want to say before I hand it over to our guests here in Denver is, if you have any questions, don't be afraid. Do not hesitate to contact your local county clerk's office. With that, I want to welcome our former congressman and our mayor to the east in Aurora, Mike Kaufman. Mike?
Well, thank you so much. As I don't know if there are too many jobs I haven't done in Colorado, but as a former Republican Secretary of State, that oversaw a presidential election in 2008, I want to say that election was secure, was safe, and was transparent. And I also want to tell the people of Colorado that going into this 2020 election, that I have every confidence that this election is transparent, it's safe and secure. And that's under a Democrat Secretary of State. And that in the city of Aurora, one of the most diverse communities in the state of Colorado, the most diverse community in the state of Colorado, that we have large immigrant communities, Hispanic, African immigrant, Asian immigrant, and I have been reaching out to those communities to those newly minted American citizens to get them to make sure that they exercise their right in voting in this election. And so it's an honor for me now to introduce State Senator Julie Gonzalez, who represents Senate District 34, and I am a guest of Senate District 34 right now. It's this area right here. State Senator.
Gracias, Mayor Kaufman. Good morning, everybody. My name is State Senator Julie Gonzalez. I'm proud to represent North, West, and downtown Denver. And I just want to say that it's election season, and we are so excited to see as much energy, enthusiasm, and participation from communities of color, first-time voters, and long-time voters as well. This Saturday, I got my ballot in the mail, and I felt like a kid at Christmas. So the very next day, my husband and I sat down. I made a nice dinner. We had a nice dinner, and then afterwards, we sat down and we voted our ballot, and we talked about each and every one of the issues. I'll say, I love my husband. We don't agree 100% of the time, but we walked through that ballot as a family. On Monday, my suegra, my mother-in-law, she called me and she said, Julia, I just got my ballot. How are we going to do this? I don't know what to do about the judges. And so we walked through, and I went online, and we walked through every single one of the judges, and she was able to cast her ballot. She took a ballot selfie, y'all. It's a big deal. Yesterday, my niece, who's going to vote for the first time in the presidential election, she got together with her cousins, and they walked through every single one of the ballot initiatives, right? These are young people coming together, young Latino first-time voters coming together to have the conversation. And today, we're going to get together as a family and turn in our ballots, right? That's the enthusiasm, that's the excitement, and that's the energy that's coming into this election season. I couldn't be prouder of the safety, security, transparency, and integrity of our election system here in Colorado. And so now's the time, y'all. If you haven't gotten registered, this is the time to go to govotecolorado.org and register to vote. I've talked to friends who are like, ¿sabes qué? I guess I'll sign up this time. And so this is the time to get registered, get engaged, and make your voice be heard. Thanks to everybody here for all that you are doing to let people know how safe and easy it is. And we have until November 3rd, Tuesday, November the 3rd at 7 p.m. to make sure that your ballot is counted. Thanks, y'all.
And as Senator Gonzalez said, if you are not yet registered, you can still register and get a ballot in the mail. Through what date, Secretary?
The 26th.
Through the 26th. And again, you can also vote in person. You can register and vote at the same time, early voting location once that starts on Election Day, to make it exercising your rights as a citizen convenient to you. With that, we're happy to open it for questions. So voter intimidation is against the law, and frankly, the way that we were able to exercise ballots in Colorado with sealed delivery into drop boxes of their mail helped reduce the opportunities for voter intimidation in Colorado. But there has been many discussions with local law enforcement and others. There's no electioneering near the ballot drop box locations, and we're going to continue to make sure that local law enforcement makes sure that every Coloradan, regardless of their party, their ideology, is able to cast their ballot free from intimidation. I think report it to local law enforcement.
Report it to the
County clerk or local law enforcement. County clerk or local law enforcement. Again, people have free speech, and if they're more than, is it 500? How many?
It's 100 for election
Yeah. So if you might see people 150, 100 feet away from a site, it's usually marked on the ground. People absolutely can exercise their rights, hold signs 100, 200 feet away, but they are not allowed to do that within 100 feet of a voting site.
There have been a lot of posts on Nextdoor and Facebook social media that there is voter intimidation, but I haven't been calling some clerks.
Yeah.
Law enforcement, I haven't seen if they're actually doing the evidence that
So I'll call upon our clerk and our secretary, but I want to say I think that some people, when they see people 100 feet away doing the normal work with their signs, they might misinterpret that as intimidation. So again, there's things that are consistent with the law and against the law. I'll turn it over to Secretary Griswold.
Thank you. And so to answer your question, when there is a report or any suspected voter intimidation, that should be immediately reported to the county clerk or my office, and we investigate everything. There has been several things on social media that has been investigated and turned out that there was not evidence. One of the things that we have in Colorado is 24-hour surveillance of drop boxes. So we can actually pull the footage, and Clerk Lopez did exactly that and did not see any evidence. With that said, voter intimidation is always illegal. Even if it's within 100 feet, 1,000 feet, it doesn't matter how far you are away from the polling location, it is always illegal. And we will act very quickly to make sure that voters have their voices heard. So far, everything is going really well.
Thank you, and I appreciate that question. Misinformation can happen in a lot of different ways. So if there's anything that you see on your social media that gives you a pause and gives you a pause about the transparency or the conduction of an election, please visit your county clerk's office. That information is trusted, it is vetted, and we make sure that from our office, you can always count on that being accurate. As far as some of those instances, you know, I had the ability to actually pull video that day and to watch our box, and I could assure you that the one thing that we saw was people steadily going by, taking selfies in front of the box. I could disclose who was taking selfies in front of the box, because I recognize them. But I'm not going to do that right now. No, it is, know that it is safe, that it's secure. At the same time, folks in Denver, we're asking you, if you see something, say something. Give us a call, 311, option 8, or call your local authorities. Voter intimidation or obstruction is illegal, and we will act quickly and swiftly to make sure that that doesn't happen, whether it be in the vicinity of one of our boxes, one of our vote centers, or even down the street over here.
Just so I'm clear, there has not been any that we know of, any incident.
We haven't seen any confirmed cases of voter intimidation near our boxes. However, if you see it on the street, make sure you hit us up, 311, or dial that local authorities. We won't tolerate that.
Jump in for a second. So in Larimer County, there was one report, there was some confusion over a municipal versus a state box, but right now everything is going really well. And again, if there is voter intimidation, we will act quickly, but Coloradans should be totally confident in the ability to cast a ballot. Most Coloradans will cast their ballot using a mail ballot. Most people will come to one of these drop boxes and cast it. But in-person voting looks like it should be going very well, and we'll just make sure that any way that a Coloradan wants to vote is safe, accessible, and secure.
And Saja Hindi asked a similar question. I'm hoping to address some rumors about voter intimidation at the ballot box. Election officials say there's no proof, but people are saying it on social media. Wondering if this is hypersensitivity or disinformation and what can be done. Let me just say that voter intimidation is un-Republican, undemocratic, and inconsistent with our values as Coloradans and Americans, and we will not stand for it in Colorado. Next question. We can have the county clerk and the secretary address our counting process in Colorado.
So I didn't quite hear the question. What election night results? Everything looks great. It looks just like normal. And the benefit is that if Coloradans vote early, we'll be able to process the ballots even more quickly. So one of the things over the last month since March is other states have really looked to us for leadership in expanding their election models. Of course, we expanded and urged folks to expand mail ballots, but we also urged folks to look at how we process ballots. And we start processing ballots here in Colorado 15 days before election. And that's what enabled us, even in our historic statewide turnout during the pandemic in our June primary, to report 89.5% of all results on election night. With that said, election night results are never official results. There are a lot of things that happen after the election, including military and overseas ballots coming in, which we know our former secretary, congressman, and mayor of Aurora served overseas, and that's very important to allow that access. We also allow signature discrepancies on the back of ballots to be cured for 8 days. Then we go into a whole host of things, including the risk-limiting audit. So election night results are never final results. We expect to be able to report a lot of those results on election day, but it probably will be less than the 89.5% we saw in the statewide primary because turnout is likely to be very much higher. And with that, Clerk Lopez, if you want to add anything about how that system works.
Yeah. Like the Secretary said, one of the great things about our model in this state is that we're able to start processing now. And voters can expect, voters in Denver, I don't want to speak for any other clerk, but they have very similar models. By the way, I'm in communication with all of our other clerks. We work together to make sure that operations are very similar. We share best practices, communication, For example, those drop boxes, you can drop a Denver box in Arapahoe or Arapahoe in Denver, and it'll get to us. When it comes to those results, we will start posting our preliminary results at 7:05. 7:05, you can actually start seeing, 7 o'clock, you can actually see those results, and we will update through the night every 90 minutes. And like the secretary said, those results are unofficial results. We don't finalize results until nearly 2 weeks later when we certify the election. And that's after we've conducted a risk-limiting audit, which is something that we do statewide to make sure that our model continues to be accurate, which it has been. So, thank you. Thank you for the question.
Go ahead.
This might be for the
Yeah.
Secretary and the County Clerk, but there's been talk around the country about folks who are armed in polling places. And I know Denver has an open carry ban. Can you bring a gun into a polling place in Colorado?
So in Colorado, we have no statewide rule regulating whether you can bring in a gun to a polling center or near a drop box. With that said, it really goes location to location, so I urge Coloradans to contact their county clerk. But with that said, again, any type of voter intimidation is illegal. So, if there is intimidating behavior, whether it's open carry allowed or not, voter intimidation is always illegal.
El voto latino es una parte muy importante de nuestra democracia aquí en Colorado y en los Estados Unidos. Es muy importante usar sus derechos para votar. Con esperanza ya recibieron la balota en el correo. Y necesita regresarlo por correo antes del 26 de octubre o en un cajón especial como esto desde el día de elección, el 3 de noviembre. Si no recibieron una boleta, pero son ciudadanos, puede registrar y votar en su county clerk edificio o un sitio de votar. You want to give it a shot there?
Ahora, soy el alcalde de la ciudad de Aurora, pero en el año 2008 fui el secretario de Estado de Colorado durante una elección presidencial. Todavía tengo confianza en el sistema de votación en nuestro estado. Yo quiero animar a todos a votar en esta elección. Es su derecho, es su obligación como ciudadano de nuestro país.
Gracias. All right, final question. Paul, you want to do it? Go ahead. Sure. We'll do one more question.
Remember, I'm from the west side, so my Spanish is a little different too. Estoy muy agradecido que ustedes hicieron esa pregunta. Como los demás, el voto latino es importante. El voto latino es importante. Como todos, es una democracia, así que es importante que todos participen. Es seguro, es transparente, es muy fácil. Solo hay que llenar su boleta, firmarla y ponerlo en uno de nuestros buzones. Nosotros aquí en Denver tenemos 38 disponibles los 24 horas al día. Así que no hay que tener miedo de ir en persona porque nosotros tenemos una boleta de correo. Es muy fácil, pero si lo necesitas, puedes ir a denvervota.org o al sitio de la Secretaría del Estado, Jenna Griswold. Es súper importante, así que voten.
All right. Final question. Good. Thank you, everybody. Let's get out and vote.